Hi again, everyone. Coach Roel here, and it's turning into a bit of a regular thing. I thought it'd be great to grab Scott from his busy day and kind of bend his ear on a couple things that have been kind of on my mind and the community's mind. So thanks again, Scott, for taking a couple of minutes out to talk to the gang here. How are you doing?
My pleasure, Roel. Doing well, and it's always a pleasure to answer a few of the questions from the folks. I wish I had a little more time to be able to do so, but thanks for checking in.
Awesome. Wanted to just kind of jump right in. I know you're kind of busy, but I know what's been kind of on the minds of a few people. We had some comments, just the general idea of if an owner and operator has relaxed their past due policies, try to show some compassion. And I know a lot of people have done that in our community. In light of that pandemic, when would you think it might be acceptable to reintroduce or resume the late fee policies, lien sales, getting that process started? Or are there any alternatives that people could consider for any past due tenants? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, really good question. Very timely question as well. We've seen that a lot. That has been, lots of discussions being had around the self-storage industry regarding, how do we handle this? Because, in the beginning when we headed into this, obviously everybody wants to have compassion, and we've seen, from the federal government to landlords to the self-storage REITs, apartments, banks. There has been a relaxing of the rules for payments. The apartment folks, for the most part, they weren't able to evict, and they were also, giving folks a moratorium. The courts were closed and they couldn't anyways. And, banks are forgiving loans. They're also giving some, reducing late fees or eliminating them. And so, in self-storage, people just expected that anyways. And we understand that to a degree, but the stance in our industry has been, well, we're an essential business, and it's really not affected. It's not we're putting somebody out on the street. It's not, setting their children out on the curb and during what's going on around here. It's just their stuff. It's something that they pay for. It's no different than any other service that you would pay for during this time. And so, yes, we are being compassionate to that. And where most owners in the industry has fallen, including the REITs, is that there is going to be, first of all, no increase in rates. We're not raising rents during this time period. We are not holding auctions during this time period. But what we have in self-storage is, the lien laws, and that means that after 90 days, every state has its own lien laws, but after 90 days, if they haven't paid, then we have the right to be able to auction their stuff off to recoup the lost back rent and late fees. And so depending upon where the customer, the client fell in this whole process, if they were in the beginning stages of it or afterwards, we're just not holding auctions. That's, first of all, that's just bad press. And it's just bad business. It's just something you don't do. Now, for folks that were already beyond that 90 days and up for auction, if we get to the place where, we need units and we need to open some up, we will hold the auction, because those folks, they were already behind before, the beginning of March, so before 9 weeks ago, if you want to call it, the beginning of this, the pandemic or the lockdown. So, those folks, we would still send to auction, even though, again, we're not doing any right now, and probably won't until we actually need those units when our facilities are, nearing 100% capacity. And so, as specifically said, to your question now, as states begin opening up, the economy begins to open up, when is it acceptable to start holding auctions again? And so that I don't have the magic answer for that, and for many of the owners out there that have that question, we're going to point to some states are coming on a little bit, opening up a little sooner than others. And so you may want to look to some of the REITs and the bigger clients out there. If they're holding auctions, then I think it's safe for us to be able to do so too. And when I say us, I mean we're not a REIT. We're just below those. The sandbox that we operate in is those middle markets. And for facility owners of our size, we're going to take some cues from the big guys and gals as to when they're going to be opening up and begin to hold those auctions again. If you don't have to, I wouldn't do it. If you're getting close to the place where you're going to be full, then yes, go ahead and do it. But we also, during this time, we recognized that we weren't going to, even though we weren't going to have auctions and we weren't going to raise rates, what we were going to do is we were still going to begin the procedure, the lien law procedure, which is a 90-day process of sending out late notices and cut lock notices and the delinquency notices, and then the dates as to when we could hold the auction, and you giving them last notice that, hey, this is your last opportunity to pay rent and back late fees before you do go to auction. And so there's some of those folks that that in the beginning of, the whole pandemic and the lockdown, within the next 30 days or so, as we get 90 days into this, those folks will be up for auction, because we still had started the process on those folks so that we would have the ability to do so later on. But it was up to us to determine. It was at our discretion as to whether we were going to hold those auctions or not. So if I could summarize all this once again, Roel, and for the many folks that asked that question, keep an eye on the market, keep an eye on your occupancy, take a look at what the big guys are doing, have compassion. And one of the other measures I think you also asked about, Roel, what could we possibly do? Well, call these people. Make sure your managers, if they have more free time or regardless, they should be calling these folks, because we'd rather have the money or even cut a deal with them, get a portion of the money and have them get their belongings back than go to auction and risk not getting paid for our back rent and our late fees. And then that client or customer is out their goods. And some of those, in many cases are, their personal belongings, and some of those maybe worth something invaluable to them. And so, try to make every effort possible to get in touch with them, to make some type of arrangement to pay that, to get paid, get their account paid up, and then give them their goods back is probably the best measure during this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. What do you think of some owner operators may have actually just not dealt with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we all like to think that we're supposed to be on top of everything and send out the notices when we're supposed to, but I know I've seen some comments where some people have just kind of just not dealt with it.
Stuck their head in the sand.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of people sending out another letter, saying that this has been extended, so we have been compassionate, but we also have a business, like that kind of communication as well, like pointing out that they've had extra time and trying to work them out and say, we've kind of given you some slack already, but we're going to let you know that we need to start collecting rent and start getting back to normal a little bit. What do you think of that approach?
I mean, well, Roel, this is why you're the coach, is because that is the answer, and it's communication. And throughout this entire pandemic, this entire lockdown, everything, if you look at businesses out there, any service organization, it's just communication. Everybody wants to know what's going on, and so there's been extra communication coming from all businesses, all organizations, as to how they're handling all this, how they're treating it, and what the future is going to look like. And so that is the answer to your point. The owners that have done nothing up to this point, they need to communicate with those folks to say, here's what here's what the lien law states, here's what our policy states, here's what the rental agreement that you signed states, but here's how we're going to handle this situation. And then state that. Again, I mentioned our policy is that we're not going to auction. We're not raising rates. We're not doing anything other than we are going through the lien procedures, but we will let you know if and when we're going to hold an auction and give you one last chance to pay the back rent and your late fees. But at that point, that should go out, and it could be a blanket letter that goes out to everybody, every client, that just says, here's our normal procedures for everything. Here's our office hours now, and here's what we've done to continue to be safe during this time frame. Here's the measures that we've taken. And oh, by the way, with regards to our late fees and the lien procedures, we plan to do this, and this. We don't plan to do this, and just outlining business as it is right now, and the changes that we've made as an organization and as a self-storage facility with regards to hours of operation, cleanliness, and how we're going to respond to what the state has asked us to do, and then internally, our procedures and the decisions we plan to make and implemented, so as to not be to not be compassionate to what's going on right now, and how we're going to loosen some of those rules and stipulations a little bit. So yeah, communication is a key, Roel, and just let them know. Otherwise, everybody's left wondering, and then it's a shock, and then there's unmet expectations, which also causes friction. So communication is the key.
Now, it might be a bit of out of left field, but
excuse me.
If anything, do you think that there's any advantage or any angle that our community members can take, being just below the REITs and having possibly there's a bit more of a human aspect because, the big REITs, they're pretty corporate and their policies are a little bit more removed from the actual front lines. Is there any kind of differentiator that we can sort of stress upon or
Sure.
take advantage, leverage off of?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly some of those rules that we just mentioned. I mean, there's certainly a way to be able to do that. Whereas a larger organization is probably a little more rigid, and they can't make that decision at a market level, at a facility level, where we're a lot more nimble and we can do that to determine and decide to be more lenient if we want to. Some of the other things that we've implemented and that we've seen others do is giving away free units to frontline workers, just indefinitely. Or for several months free with a 6-month lease or something along those lines for those that are needed, but also to businesses that have been displaced or closed for operations that they're allowed to come in and like artist studios. There's been bands that normally get together to practice, but they do it in an area or in a setting that is with more crowded people around, or the building that they used to do it in is closed. But also storage facility, I mean, there's nobody around. If you get your band together and it's fewer than X number of people that the state says is safe, then they can go into a self-storage unit and they can practice. There's again some work craftsmen that can't go into a larger facility or building that they used to have their business out of because it's on lockdown. They're now taking their tools and a few of their goods or items and warehousing at a self-storage facility, and they have the ability to continue to conduct business. So just promoting that there are multiple uses for a unit at a self-storage facility, especially if their old business and where they used to conduct business in has been in lockdown and they can't go there any longer. And there's very few places that they can go and just gather, and they can't do it in public. But certainly at a facility behind the gates of a self-storage facility in a non-public essential business, as long as they're adhering to our rules and doing it by not gathering too many people at that location, and they're in their own unit between the walls of their 10 by 10 and their 10 by 15, then certainly we can. There's a lot that can be done in a self-storage facility that can't be done in a normal setting in our abnormal environment right now.
As long as they're not sleeping there overnight.
Correct. That's illegal. Do not allow that. If you see it, by all means, you have to stop that immediately.
That's great. Yeah, that's really interesting food for thought. So there are some opportunities there if you can think creatively, aren't there?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's awesome. So like I promise each time we get to chat together, I don't want to keep you too long. Thanks for those insights. And we'll keep monitoring the comments and all the different social media, and we'll try to get a pulse of what our gang is thinking in the community, and I'll kind of filter through those and pose them to you every so often.
Perfect. Love to help when I can. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Scott.
All right. Thanks, Roel. Good to talk to you again.
You too. Take care. Thanks again for joining us here at Self-Storage Investing. We really, really appreciate it. For more great content like this, make sure to click the subscribe button below this video. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Bigger Pockets. You can also visit us at our main website at SelfStorageInvesting.com, where you'll find even more free content, our ebook, and registration to our free webinars and education courses, and much, much more. Once again, for more great content like this, please click the subscribe button below. Thank you.